Interview is being taped April 24th, 1995. The West Palm Beach Garden Club is sponsoring a community project to paint a mural on a wall in Dreher Park. The wall is at the foot of Bradley Court at the eastern boundary of the present park. The mural will depict typical animal and plant life native to the region 75 years ago. The central panel will have a Seminole Indian theme. Dr. Tom Sturrock's family settled in the area around 1919 and had first-hand knowledge of the Seminole use of the area that is now the north end of Dreher Park. The West Palm Beach Garden Club has asked Dr. Sturrock to share this information with us today. Dr. Sturrock, could you first tell us a little about yourself?
Thank you. It's a pleasure to bring you these memories that I have of information that I know of firsthand and other information that has been passed on to me many years ago by my grandparents. My grandparents, William and Mary Sturrock, moved from Scotland in approximately 1915 and lived in the Miami area for several years before moving to the West Palm Beach area in approximately 1919. They lived in a house that is still standing today at the west end of Camellia Road, which has the house number of 1021. This is a two-story house built of the old Dade County pine and of the railroad-type building construction. There were a number of these houses in the south end of West Palm Beach, and there are a few of them still standing today, including this one that was my grandparents' home. My grandfather, William Sturrock, died in 1926, and my grandmother, Mary, lived there until she died in 1943. I do not remember my grandfather because he died before we moved to the area in about 1930, but I do very well remember my grandmother living there and telling us these stories. The West Palm Beach Canal was built following World War I. The construction took several years. I don't recall the exact dates, but these should be a matter of record, either in the Historical Society or the Lake Worth Drainage District, or somewhere there should be records as to the time and time frame that these were done. But it followed World War I and was completed in the early part of the 1920s. The dates I'm not really sure of without doing some research on them. Prior to the building of the West Palm Beach Canal, there was a chain of lakes which are still existing today, starting at Lake Mangonia, just south of 45th Street in West Palm Beach, following south into Clear Lake, and then into Lake Clark, Lake Osborne, and Lake Ida down in the Delray Beach area. This was all one continuous band of water before the drainage which was accomplished by the West Palm Beach Canal. When the West Palm Beach Canal was built and finalized in the early 1920s, and the water was able to drain out into Lake Worth, bringing in the muck and the tannic acid and polluting the then pristine lake, the water level dropped, as my grandmother told me, almost overnight. And the large body of water, which was then left as this residual chain of lakes that we know today. The house that my grandmother lived in is a two-story house, and she told me that from her upstairs bedroom windows, she was able to see Indians coming in their dugout canoes, following over to what was a trading post on current West Lakewood Drive. Looking at West Lakewood Road, I guess it is, rather than drive, there was a two-story general store and a dock there where the Indians would come in and do their trading, bringing in the goods they had and trading it for whatever staples they needed. To the best of my recollection, this trading post was run by members of the Bunker family, and this, of course, is where Bunker Road gets its name from this family. This trading post on what is now West Lakewood Road, of course, is not the Bunker Road, but it was run by the Bunker family, and was called the Bunker Landing because there was a dock there and the Indians were able to come in and do their trading. I remember this store, and as a young lad used to drive there on my bicycle and buy some candy and gum and a few things like that. Looking at the space today, there is a two-story house at 1000 West Lakewood Road. This has been remodeled, converted into a series of apartments, and to the best of my recollection, this is the old building that was this general store. If it's not the same building, it's right close to where it was, but since it's a two-story building, everything else in that area is one story. I'm assuming it's the old frame of the two-story trading post that has now been converted into a series of apartments. The eastern shore of what is now the residual Lake Clark covered the area that essentially is now Dreher Park and the western end of the series of roads running south from Southern Boulevard west of Parker, which would include Alamanda, Bignonia, Camellia, Bradley, Francis, Lakewood, Green, McIntyre, Selkirk, Hanson, and so on. Those streets down between Southern Boulevard and Bunker Road. The eastern shore went up, partway up that, not as far as Parker. Parker is a high ridge, and as you drive along Parker Avenue and look west on those streets, you'll notice that they all slope down greatly to the west. The western part were underwater, and the eastern part of them, up just west of Parker, were above waterline, and this is where the houses were built along in that area. Back in approximately 1956-7, in that general time frame, Bradley Court was put through, and a number of houses were built there in that development. When that street was put through, fill was borrowed from the western end to raise the, from beyond the western end, to raise the area so that the houses could be built. The borrow pit that was used for this soil resulted in the lake, which is now in Dreher Park, off the west end of Bradley Court. The muck was used in the city parks, and the sand was used to fill in which is now Bradley Court, the western end of it. The last several houses on the western end of Bradley Court were built on fill, and one or two houses has a foundation that's bigger than the house built underneath them because of this fill situation. As you go, the houses to the east, which is the west side of Parker Avenue, were built on solid ground, but the rest of it was, the western part was filled in, and I observed them building those houses myself since my property is adjacent to it. So what used to be lake bed, where all those lakes were and shrunk when the West Palm Beach Canal were put through, are now, Dreher Park is essentially in that area, and of course there's land to the north and the south and the east and the west that was in the same way, but this is the one that we are focusing on in our discussion today. So the Dreher Park area was at one time underwater, and it was lake bed. And where this wall is that we're contemplating the mural would have been probably underwater, maybe right along the eastern shore, but I assume it is west of the shoreline because of that fill area in there. So we're actually talking about putting this mural in what was at one time Lake Clark. Another part of this development that may be of interest is that when the West Palm Beach Canal was put through in the early 20s, there was a branch off of it which was referred to as the Spur Canal that runs approximately northeast, goes across where Mercer Avenue is today, cuts across where Dock Street and Market Street, this is where they got the name because of a dock, goes up to the edge of Howard Park, along the west edge of Howard Park, up to where there is a turning basin just south of Okeechobee Road. This was built so that farmers from the Everglades could come in by boat, how big they were. I heard barges, but there may be small barges, would come in on the West Palm Beach Canal, take this spur canal to the northeast, go up to this turning basin, turn around and come back on out again. Now, where Howard Park is today, where the firehouse is there and the Armory Art School, that armory used to be the National Guard Armory before they moved out west and that became an art school. But prior to the building of that armory, there was an open shed that was known as the Farmers Market. The farmers would bring in their produce by water and unload there on Dock Street, Market Street, and so on, up along in that area, and have their produce taken over to the Farmers Market, which is now in Howard Park, and there various merchants, traders, and so on would buy them from the farmers and carry them to the stores for sale, and actually even going up and down the roads and peddling them. When the boats were through, they'd go up to the turning basin, turn around and come back out again. Now, it used to be at that point that Parker Avenue only extended north as far as Park Street and went directly into what is now Howard Park, which was named after a gentleman they called Dad Howard, who was then director of the parks system for the city many years ago, and it was named after him after his retirement. Parker Avenue was later built along the western edge of Howard Park and to the east of this spur canal, connecting on up into Old which is currently Old Okeechobee Road, Okeechobee Boulevard, and into Tamarind Avenue. Apparently there was a culvert put in there. I don't see a bridge across that area now, and this water still flows underneath that, but it's not navigable any longer. But that was the history of it, why it was put in. It was put in to bring in produce from the Everglades into the farmers market, which is now in Howard Park. This movement of produce from the farms in the Everglades into the coast for sale was brought by water, because water was a cheap means of transportation. This was before the development of the road system we have. Southern Boulevard at that point did not extend west, and there was a piece of a road that was called Connors Highway, which was a toll road going out to the Everglades out by 20 Mile Bend, and eventually that was put through. And when it became a free road after the tolls were paid off and truck transportation was so much more readily available, this replaced the water transportation, and it was no longer used for that purpose. We also have other transportations to the northern markets, which brought trucks, railroad cars, refrigeration, and so on, be able to take the produce from these farms in the Everglades, and of course along which we now call the range line, carry them to the northern markets, and it wasn't necessary to bring them in to a local handling area like we talked about here in Howard Park. I've been asked to comment on the demise of the Indian trading at the Bunker's Landing on West Lakewood. When the West Palm Beach Canal was put through and all that water level dropped, it was no longer possible for the Indians to come in with their dugout canoes into that area, and they were cut off from transportation to it. At that same time, when the roads were built out into the Everglades and vehicular transportation was permitted, it was able then to develop stores and trading posts farther west, and the Indians didn't have to go as far to do their trading. So with this advent of communications and roads and so on, there was no need for the Indian trading posts like there was at Bunker's Landing on Lakewood. This became a general store that sold produce and groceries, odds and ends, hardware, and so on to the people in the area, and later on went out of business. After the drainage of the Lake Clark lake bed, this area, which is now Dreher Park, was a sort of a low, mucky, old lake bed area. A park was developed in there, that is, a camp, I should say, was developed, which was called Bacon Park. I don't remember the call where the name Bacon came from, but this was used, and people who were migrating to the area from the north used to take and pitch their tents and live there off and on until they got established. But for many years this was known as Bacon Park, and later on the city of West Palm Beach developed their plant nursery in this area. Here they raised their plants for using in the various parks, streets, plantings, and so on. Instrumental in developing this was the then Parks Director for the city of West Palm Beach, Mr. Paul Dreher, who just died a couple of years ago. Mr. Dreher developed this nursery and used it to raise the plants, which were then planted in various places throughout the city. Later, when Mr. Dreher retired, the city named the park, changed the name from Bacon Park to Dreher Park in his honor. And this was the area that is approximately where the Science Museum and Zoo, planetarium and so on are located in this part of the park. As years went by, the city of West Palm Beach added more property to Dreher Park, and it now extends all the way from Southern Boulevard down to Forest Hill Boulevard. And when the I-95 corridor was put through, there was condemnation proceedings, and the state and federal government purchased some land from the city, which took off a slice off the western side of which is now Dreher Park. The money from this was used in the development of the facilities that we now know and enjoy in a great part of the park area. Part of which is now the north end of Dreher Park, off the end of Begonia, or Bignonia as name has been changed and slurred over the years, was a nursery. This nursery was known as the Exotic Nursery and was run by owned by my uncle William D. Sturrock, and ran for a number of years. This nursery brought in a number of trees and had them planted in there. And they had sheds, growing sheds, slat houses, various offices, equipment buildings, and so on were located in that area. And the entrance to it was off the end of which is currently Bignonia. It did not extend to the north up to Southern Boulevard as the park goes now. Back in the 30s, after my uncle died, this land was taken over, the nursery was taken over by a gentleman who later became mayor of the city of West Palm Beach, E. Tinsley Halter, and run as the Island Landscape Company for a number of years. Later, when this went out of business, it was purchased by some land developers who were interested in building some high-density apartments, stores, and so on there. Local residents were incensed at the building of such a high-density building, bringing in the people, bringing in the roads, and so on, that there was an action by a local committee to urge the city to purchase it for a park. This committee pushed and formed a group that had a ballot resolution put on to float a bond issue to buy this land and develop it. This was successful, and the bonds which were voted by the city of West Palm Beach, the real estate bonds, to pay for this, are still being paid for on our taxes, and this is 1995, and I think there's about 2 or 3 more years to go before all those bonds are retired. So the voters, taxpayers of the city of West Palm Beach, voted themselves a tax increase to build and develop this north end of Dreher Park as a passive park. So this is used very extensively now, and the north end particularly is developed. The south end is used some picnic areas, but not as extensive as the north end. But this north end of the park, which is extension of the old Bacon Park, the old Exotic Nursery, and later the Island Landscape Company, and some other lands adjacent to it that were brought in, and are now into the north end of Dreher Park, and is used very extensively as a passive park. And since my property is adjacent to that, I see activities going on there: bicycle riding, walking, picnics, ball games, you name it. It's extensively used as a passive park and enjoyed greatly by the population of West Palm Beach, who voted themselves the tax burden of buying this and developing it, and they are taking great interest in it, and because of their money that they have put into it. As I mentioned earlier, I've lived in the south end of West Palm Beach since approximately 1930. I went to school in the local schools, Palmetto School, Southborough School, Coniston, Palm Beach High School, and Palm Beach Junior College before going off to World War II. When I came back from World War II, I went into the nursery business with my father there on Camellia Road, and have seen this area develop and grow over these many, many, many years. Since this property at the north end of Dreher Park was essentially a nursery, as I mentioned, my uncle's exotic nursery, and later Mr. Halter's Island Landscape Company, many of these specimen trees were planted in there. They were collected from various botanical gardens, plant introduction stations, and so on. This was used as their propagating material in the nursery. But when the nursery went out of business, many of these specimen trees are still there. After the city of West Palm Beach took it over and developed Dreher Park, the then chairman of the Parks and Recreation Committee was very interested in tropical flowering trees. David Wedge, who served as chairman of this, was very interested in flowering trees and brought in and had developed, with the assistance of John Van Epp, who was the parks director and later landscape architect for the city of West Palm Beach, many of these specimen trees. These trees are an extension of the work that was started by Paul Dreher many years ago when he had the city nursery in this area. These trees were used as a framework for the development of this North Park. Many of them are fairly rare and should be protected. So I'd urge the garden clubs, the City of West Palm Beach, the Historical Society, or whoever hears this tape in the future, to be aware of these and not be carried away with the bulldozer mentality that many developers have of knocking down anything that's in their way. Before World War II, I had graduated from the University of Florida with my bachelor's and master's degree in tropical horticulture, and as I said earlier, I came back and went into the nursery business and used this. Later I returned to the University of Florida, earned my Doctor of Philosophy degree in horticulture, and came back and taught at Palm Beach Junior College for 4 years, moved on to Florida Atlantic University as a member of their opening faculty, and taught there for 25 years. Teaching botany and horticulture and various administrative posts. Now that I'm retired, I am still interested in plants, still interested in horticulture, and with my background and knowing some of these plants, I'm urging the garden club and those who are interested, and the City of West Palm Beach, of course, since they are the owners of the property, to maintain Dreher Park as a passive park and use it, of course,